It was a sunny Tuesday morning in London. The sky was blue with only a few white clouds. Outside Buckingham Palace, hundreds of tourists stood behind the metal barriers. They all wanted to see the famous royal guards in their bright red coats and tall black furry hats. Among these tourists was Jack Wilson, a man from America. Jack was 40 years old with dark brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides. He wore blue jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a black jacket that looked too warm for the nice weather. Unlike the other happy tourists, Jack did not smile. His face was serious, almost angry. His eyes never stopped moving, looking at each guard carefully. Jack had been standing there for 3 hours already. He had a small backpack with him. Every few minutes, he would open this backpack and check something inside, then close it quickly. Some people standing near him thought this was strange, but they were too busy taking photos to pay much attention to him. The royal guard stood very still. They did not smile. They did not talk. They did not move, even when flies landed on their faces or when tourists tried to make them laugh. This was their job, to stand like statues and guard the Queen's home. One guard stood closer to where Jack was waiting. This guard was Private Thomas Bennett. He was 25 years old and had been a royal guard for 3 years. Thomas was known for being one of the best guards. Not once had he ever broken his serious face or moved when he wasn't supposed to. His commanders often used him as an example for new guards to follow. As the morning went on, more and more tourists arrived. They pushed against each other, trying to get the best photos. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Tour guides held up colored umbrellas so their groups could find them in the crowd. The noise grew louder as people from all over the world talked in many different languages. Jack moved slowly through the crowd. Step by step, he got closer to the front, closer to where Thomas stood guard. Jack's hands were shaking a little. Sweat appeared on his forehead, even though it wasn't very hot. He kept touching the zipper of his backpack, opening it just a tiny bit, then closing it again. An old woman standing next to Jack smiled at him. "First time in London?" she asked in a friendly voice. Jack jumped a little, surprised that someone was talking to him. "Yes," he said quickly, not looking at her. "First time. The guards are amazing, aren't they?" The woman continued, standing so still for hours. "I don't know how they do it. My grandson wanted to be a royal guard when he was little." Jack nodded but didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Thomas now. There was something in his look, not just interest, but something deeper, something that looked like hate. The woman noticed Jack's strange look and moved away from him, pulling her husband with her. "That man seems odd," she whispered to her husband. "Let's stand somewhere else." By noon, Jack had reached the front of the crowd. Only the metal barrier and about 10 feet of space separated him from Thomas. Jack's breathing got faster. He opened his backpack all the way and reached inside. His hand came out holding something wrapped in paper. 2 police officers were walking nearby, watching the crowd. They didn't notice Jack yet. A group of school children arrived, making noise and waving small British flags. In the middle of all this movement and noise, Jack took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Thomas's face. "It's you," Jack whispered, though no one could hear him in the noisy crowd. "I finally found you." Jack held the paper-wrapped object tightly in his hand. His heart beat fast in his chest. For 5 years, he had thought about this moment. 5 long years of anger and hurt. Now the man who had ruined his life was standing right in front of him, dressed in a fancy red coat and tall black hat. A young woman next to Jack was trying to take a selfie with the guard in the background. She kept moving left and right to get the perfect angle. This annoyed Jack. He just wanted her to go away. After a minute, she finally got her photo and moved on. Now Jack had a clear view of Thomas. Jack unwrapped the paper in his hands. Inside was a sandwich. It was just a simple cheese sandwich that he had bought at a small shop that morning. But to Jack, it was more than food. It was a weapon. His fingers pressed into the soft bread as his anger grew stronger. Thomas stood perfectly still, like he was made of stone. His eyes looked straight ahead, not focusing on any specific person in the crowd. He didn't blink much. His face showed no emotion. He had practiced this blank look for many hours during his training. "Today you will notice me," Jack whispered. "Today you will remember what you did." Two Japanese tourists moved away from the barrier, creating a small empty space in front of Jack. This was his chance. Without thinking anymore, Jack pulled his arm back and threw the sandwich as hard as he could. The sandwich flew through the air. People in the crowd didn't notice it at first. It happened so fast. The sandwich hit Thomas directly in the face. Pieces of cheese and bread stuck to his cheek. A bit of butter smeared across his nose. But the worst part was the bright yellow mustard that dripped down into his perfectly clean red coat. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Thomas didn't move. It was as if he hadn't felt the sandwich hit him. But then everyone around them started reacting. A woman screamed. Someone else shouted, "Did you see that?" Children pointed. Phones came out as people started recording. The 2 police officers who had been walking nearby ran toward Jack. One of them, a tall man with a serious face, shouted, "Stop right there." The other officer, a younger woman with short hair, spoke into her radio, calling for help. People moved away from Jack quickly. No one wanted to be near the man who had attacked a royal guard. Some parents pulled their children behind them protectively. Others just stared with open mouths, shocked by what they had seen. Jack didn't try to run. He just stood there, watching Thomas, waiting for some sign that the guard recognized him. But Thomas still didn't move or speak. "Sir, put your hands where I can see them," the male officer commanded as he approached Jack. Jack slowly raised his hands. "That man stole my life," Jack said, pointing at Thomas. "He deserves worse than a sandwich in his face." The female officer reached Jack first. She took his arm firmly, but not roughly. "Sir, you're under arrest for assaulting a royal guard. You'll need to come with us." Jack didn't resist. He kept his eyes on Thomas as the officers prepared to take him away. "Look at me," Jack shouted at Thomas. "You know who I am. Stop pretending." The crowd was completely focused on this drama now. Tourists who had been at the back pushed forward, trying to see what was happening. Tour guides tried to keep their groups together, while everyone wanted to watch the exciting scene. Then something unexpected happened. Thomas blinked. His eyes, which had been staring straight ahead, slowly moved until they were looking directly at Jack. A tiny movement that broke all the rules of being a royal guard. The crowd went silent. The police officers stopped moving. Everyone watched as Thomas's eyes fixed on Jack's angry face. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Everyone watched as Thomas, the royal guard who never broke the rules, looked directly at Jack. Tiny bits of cheese and bread still stuck to Thomas's face, but he didn't try to clean them off. "Take him away," said a new voice. A senior officer had arrived. He wore a different uniform with more medals and badges than the other officers. His name was Captain Harris, and he had been in charge of palace security for 15 years. The 2 police officers started to lead Jack away. Jack struggled a little now. "Wait," he shouted. "He knows who I am. Ask him." Captain Harris looked at Thomas with a stern face. "Private Bennett, return to your position immediately." But Thomas didn't move his eyes away from Jack. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone even more than the sandwich throwing. He spoke. "Sir," Thomas said to Captain Harris, "I need to speak with this man." The captain's face turned red with anger. "That is completely against protocol. Private, return to your position at once." More police officers had arrived now. They formed a circle around Jack, ready to take him to the police station. The crowd of tourists had grown larger. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next in this strange situation. Thomas slowly raised his hand and wiped the sandwich pieces from his face. His movements were careful and controlled. Then he took 3 steps forward, leaving his guard position completely. "Sir," Thomas said again to Captain Harris, "This is a special case. I believe I know why this man is upset." The crowd whispered excitedly. Some people were live streaming the whole thing on their phones. This would surely be on the news tonight. "This man," Thomas continued, pointing at Jack, "believes I am someone else. Someone who hurt him badly." Jack's mouth opened in surprise. "You admit it? You admit what you did to Sarah and me?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "No, I don't admit it because I didn't do it, but I think I know who did." Captain Harris looked completely confused now. He had never dealt with anything like this in his 15 years of service. "Private Bennett, explain yourself immediately." Thomas stood straight and tall, like the good soldier he was. "Sir, this man believes I am Robert Bennett. Robert Bennett is my twin brother." A wave of surprised sounds came from the crowd. People looked at each other with wide eyes. A twin brother. It was like something from a movie. Jack's angry face changed to a look of confusion. "Twin brother? You're lying. You're just trying to trick me." Thomas reached into a small pocket inside his uniform jacket. He pulled out a small wallet and opened it. Inside was a photo. He handed it to Captain Harris. "This is a picture of me and my brother Robert, at our sister's wedding 3 years ago," Thomas explained. "We are identical twins." Captain Harris looked at the photo, then at Thomas, then at Jack. His face softened a little. "This is highly unusual," he said. One of the police officers holding Jack spoke up. "Sir, we should still take this man in for assault. He can't just throw food at the Royal Guards and get away with it." Captain Harris nodded. "Yes, of course." He turned to Thomas. "Private Bennett, we will discuss this later. For now, return to your position." But Thomas wasn't ready to let it go. "Sir, may I have 5 minutes to speak with this man? I believe I can help solve a problem that has been hurting him for years." The crowd was completely silent now, waiting for the captain's answer. Even the children had stopped talking and moving around. Everyone could feel that something important was happening. Captain Harris looked around at all the watching tourists with their phones recording everything. He sighed deeply. 3 minutes, private. Not 1 second more. Captain Harris pointed to a small area away from the main crowd. It was a spot near the palace gates where guards sometimes took short breaks during long shifts. "You can talk there," he said to Thomas and Jack. 3 minutes only." The police officers looked unsure about what to do. Captain Harris nodded at them. "Release him, but stay close," he ordered. They let go of Jack's arms, but stayed right behind him. Thomas walked toward the quiet spot with Jack following him. The crowd tried to move closer to hear what they would say, but more police officers had arrived and were keeping people back. Everyone was disappointed that they couldn't hear the conversation, but they still watched closely. When they reached the quiet area, Thomas and Jack stood facing each other. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other's faces. It was strange for Jack to see the face that had haunted his dreams for 5 years, the face that looked exactly like the man who had stolen his wife. "My brother Robert," Thomas finally said in a quiet voice, "did a terrible thing to you." Jack's hands were shaking. "So you admit it? You admit he took Sarah away from me?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, Robert met your wife online 5 years ago. He was working in Manchester at the time." Jack's eyes filled with tears. He had been angry for so long that feeling anything else was difficult for him. She left without even saying goodbye, just a note saying she had found someone better. Thomas looked down at his shiny black boots, ashamed for his brother's actions. "Robert has always been different from me. We look the same on the outside, but inside we are very different people." "Where is he now?" Jack asked, his voice getting louder. "I came to England to find him." Thomas put his finger to his lips, reminding Jack to stay quiet. The captain was watching them closely, ready to end their talk if things got out of control. "Robert lives in Bristol now," Thomas said. "He works at a bank there." Jack's face turned red again. "Is he still with her? Are they still together? Thomas shook his head. No. Sarah left him after just 8 months. Robert told me, she said, he wasn't the man she thought he was. This news hit Jack hard. He took a step back and put his hand on his chest, like his heart was hurting. She left him too. Yes, Thomas said. Robert has gone through 3 more relationships since then. He always chases something new and exciting, but he never stays happy for long. Jack didn't know what to feel. For 5 years, he had imagined Sarah and Robert living a perfect, happy life together while he suffered alone. Finding out that wasn't true changed something inside him. Where is Sarah now? Jack asked, his voice softer. Thomas shrugged. I don't know. Robert lost touch with her years ago. Captain Harris was walking toward them now. Their 3 minutes were almost up. I'm sorry for what my brother did, Thomas said quickly. And I'm sorry you thought I was him. But throwing sandwiches at Royal Guards isn't the way to solve your problems. Jack almost smiled for the first time. Yeah, I see that now. I'll probably go to jail for this, won't I? Thomas glanced at Captain Harris, who was now just a few steps away. Maybe not, if I talk to them. But first, I need to know something important. What's that? Jack asked. Thomas looked straight into Jack's eyes. If I help you meet Robert, what will you do? Are you looking for revenge? Jack thought about this question. It was something he hadn't really considered. He had been so focused on finding Robert that he hadn't planned what would happen next. Time's up, Captain Harris announced, reaching them. Private Bennett, return to your post. Sir, you'll need to come with us to the station. Jack looked at Thomas, then at Captain Harris. He hadn't answered Thomas's important question about what he would do if he met Robert. Now their time was up. Sir, please come with us, one of the police officers said to Jack, taking his arm again. Thomas suddenly spoke to Captain Harris. Sir, may I make a request? Captain Harris sighed heavily. This day was not going as planned. What is it, Private Bennett? I'd like to handle this situation myself, Thomas said. This man came to England because of my brother. I feel responsible in a way. Captain Harris shook his head. This man assaulted a royal guard. That's a serious offense. He needs to face the consequences. The police officers started to lead Jack away. Jack didn't fight them this time. He seemed lost in thought, trying to process everything he had just learned about Sarah and Robert. Thomas took a deep breath and said something that surprised everyone. Sir, I wish to use my special leave day. Captain Harris's eyebrows went up. Your special leave day. Now, that's highly irregular, Private. Every Royal Guard got one special leave day per year that they could use for emergencies. Most guards saved these days for family events or real emergencies. Using one for a stranger who had just thrown a sandwich at you was very unusual. Yes, sir, Thomas said firmly. I believe this qualifies as an emergency. My family's reputation is at stake. The crowd of tourists was still watching. Many had no idea what was being said, but they could tell something important was happening. Some had been there for over an hour now, completely forgetting their plans to visit other London attractions. Captain Harris rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He looked at his watch, then at the crowd, then at Thomas's determined face. Fine, he said finally. You can have your special leave. But he pointed his finger at Thomas. You are responsible for this man. If he causes any more trouble, it's on you. Understand? Thomas stood straight and gave a perfect salute. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Captain Harris turned to the police officers. Release him into Private Bennett's custody. Make sure you take all their information first. The officers looked confused but followed orders. One of them took out a small notebook and began writing down Jack's full name, passport number, and the hotel where he was staying in London. While this was happening, Thomas leaned close to Jack and whispered, You never answered my question. What will you do if you meet Robert? Jack looked at Thomas. His face was no longer angry. He looked tired and sad. For 5 years, all I wanted was to find him and hurt him like he hurt me. But now, he paused. Now I don't know. Finding out Sarah left him too, it changes things. Thomas nodded. Good, because I will help you meet Robert, but only if you promise not to hurt him. He's still my brother, even though he did wrong. Jack thought for a moment, then nodded. I promise. I just want to talk to him. I need to understand why it all happened. The police officers finished taking their information. One of them handed Jack his passport back. You're free to go with Private Bennett, but don't leave London without informing us first. Captain Harris gave Thomas one last stern look. You have 24 hours of special leave, starting now. Report back tomorrow at 1400 hours. And for heaven's sake, change out of your uniform first. Thomas nodded and began unbuttoning his bright red jacket. Another guard had already arrived to take his place in the line. Jack watched as Thomas quickly changed into normal clothes that had been brought from the guard's changing room. In simple black pants and a white shirt, Thomas looked like any regular person. It was hard to believe he was the same stiff, formal guard from earlier. Ready? Thomas asked Jack when he was finished changing. Jack nodded. Ready. Thomas led Jack away from Buckingham Palace. The crowd of tourists slowly broke up, disappointed that the excitement was over. Some followed Thomas and Jack for a little while, hoping to see more drama, but Thomas took a side path that most tourists didn't know about. We need to catch a train to Bristol, Thomas said as they walked quickly through the busy London streets. Robert lives there now. It's about 2 hours away by train. Jack nodded but didn't say anything. Now that his anger was fading, he felt embarrassed about throwing the sandwich. What had he been thinking? He could have ended up in jail. They'd reached Paddington Station and Thomas bought 2 tickets for the next train to Bristol. They had 30 minutes to wait. Are you hungry? Thomas asked. We could get something to eat before the train. Jack smiled a little. As long as it's not sandwiches. Thomas laughed, and Jack realized it was the first time he had seen the serious guard smile. Thomas's whole face changed when he smiled, becoming softer and younger. They found a small cafe in the station and ordered coffee and meat pies. As they ate, an awkward silence fell between them. They were strangers brought together by a strange situation. Finally, Thomas spoke. Tell me about yourself, Jack. What do you do back in America? Jack took a sip of his coffee. I teach math at a high school in Ohio, or at least I did. I quit my job to come here and find. He paused. Your brother. Thomas looked surprised. You quit your job just to find Robert? Jack nodded, looking down at his half-eaten pie. I've been angry for so long. It's like my life stopped when Sarah left. I couldn't move forward. I thought if I found Robert and confronted him, I could finally let go and move on. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 5 years is a long time to hold on to anger. Jack nodded again. I know. It sounds crazy when you say it out loud. What about family? Do you have children? Thomas asked. No, Jack said. Sarah and I were trying to have kids when she left. That made it even worse, you know. We had all these plans for our future together, and then suddenly she was gone. Thomas looked uncomfortable. His brother had caused this man so much pain. I'm sorry, he said simply. Their train was announced over the speaker system. They gathered their things and headed to the platform. The train was quite full, but they found 2 seats together near the back. As the train pulled out of London, Jack looked out the window at the city disappearing behind them. I've never been to England before, he said. I always wanted to visit, but not like this. Not for this reason. Thomas nodded. Maybe after all this is over, you can see some nicer parts of the country. The Lake District is beautiful. So is Scotland. Jack turned from the window to look at Thomas. Why are you helping me? I threw a sandwich at your face. I could have gotten you in trouble with your captain. Thomas thought about this question for a moment. I've always tried to fix Robert's mistakes, ever since we were children. He would break something, and I would help repair it. He would hurt someone's feelings, and I would try to make things better. But this is different, Jack said. This is much bigger than a childhood mistake. Thomas nodded. Yes, it is. But you're also the first person who's ever tracked him down like this. The first person who was hurt badly enough to come looking for answers. I think you deserve those answers. Jack looked back out the window. The train was moving fast now, passing through small towns and green fields. What if I don't like the answers I get? Thomas didn't respond right away. Finally, he said, sometimes the truth hurts. But living with anger for 5 years has hurt you more, hasn't it? Jack couldn't argue with that. As the train sped toward Bristol, he wondered what Robert would say when they found him. And more importantly, he wondered how he would feel when he finally came face to face with the man who had changed his life forever. The train arrived in Bristol 2 hours later. It was now late afternoon, and the sun was starting to move lower in the sky. Thomas and Jack stepped off the train onto the platform. The station was busy with people going home from work. Do you know where Robert lives? Jack asked as they walked through the station. Thomas nodded. Yes, he has a flat near the harbor. It's about a 20-minute walk from here. They left the station and began walking through the city. Bristol was different from London. It was smaller and felt more relaxed. There were colorful houses on the hills and boats in the harbor. On another day, Jack might have enjoyed the view. Are you going to call Robert? Jack asked. To tell him we're coming. Thomas shook his head. No. If I call, he might not be there when we arrive. Robert is good at avoiding difficult situations. As they walked, Thomas told Jack more about his brother. We look exactly the same on the outside, but we are very different people. I've always liked rules and order. Robert likes excitement and new things. I joined the army because I wanted to serve my country. Robert changes jobs every few months because he gets bored easily. Jack listened carefully. He was trying to understand the man who had taken his wife away. Was he always like that, even as a child? Yes, Thomas said. Our parents didn't know what to do with him. He was always in trouble at school, not because he was bad, but because he couldn't sit still and follow rules. They turned onto a street that ran along the harbor. Boats of all sizes were tied up along the water. Some were small fishing boats, others were expensive yachts. People were sitting at outdoor cafes, enjoying the nice weather. Thomas stopped walking and pointed to a modern apartment building. That's where Robert lives. 3rd floor. Jack's heart started beating faster. After 5 years of anger and pain, he was finally going to meet the man who had taken Sarah away. What would he say? What would Robert say? Are you ready? Thomas asked, looking concerned. Jack took a deep breath. Yes. Let's go. They entered the building and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Thomas led the way to apartment 307 and knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Maybe he's not home, Jack said, feeling both disappointed and relieved. Thomas frowned. His car is in the parking lot. I saw it when we came in. He should be home. Just then, they heard movement inside the apartment. Someone was coming to the door. Jack stood up straighter, preparing himself for what was about to happen. The door opened, and Jack found himself looking at an exact copy of Thomas. The same face, the same height, the same blue eyes. It was like seeing double. The only difference was that Robert had longer hair and was wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt. Robert's eyes widened in surprise when he saw his brother. Then his gaze moved to Jack, and his face changed. He looked scared. Thomas, what are you doing here, and who is this? Robert asked, his voice shaking a little. Before Thomas could answer, Jack spoke. My name is Jack Wilson. You took my wife Sarah away from me 5 years ago. Robert's face went pale. He gripped the doorframe like he might fall. How did you find me? Thomas pointed to his uniform jacket, which he was carrying over his arm. He thought I was you. He threw a sandwich at me outside Buckingham Palace. Robert looked confused. He what? "Can we come in?" Thomas asked firmly. "We need to talk." Robert hesitated, looking like he wanted to close the door and hide. But after a moment, he stepped back. "Yes, come in." Jack and Thomas entered the apartment. It was modern and clean, with large windows looking out over the harbor. But Jack didn't notice the view. His eyes were fixed on Robert, the man who had haunted his dreams for 5 years. "Sit down," Robert said, pointing to the sofa. "I'll make some tea. This looks like a conversation we all need to be sitting down for." Jack and Thomas sat on the sofa while Robert went to the kitchen to make tea. Jack could hear the sound of cups being taken from cupboards and water being poured. His hands were shaking slightly as he waited. After all these years of imagining this moment, it was finally happening. Robert returned with 3 cups of tea on a tray. He placed the tray on the coffee table and sat in a chair across from them. No one spoke for a moment. Robert looked nervous, his eyes moving between his brother and Jack. "So," Robert finally said, "you threw a sandwich at my brother." Jack felt his face get warm. "I thought he was you. I saw him standing there in his uniform, and I lost control." Thomas took a sip of his tea. Captain Harris was not pleased. Robert looked at his brother. "You could have gotten in serious trouble because of me. Again. I'm sorry." Thomas shrugged. "It's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last." Jack put his tea down without drinking it. He couldn't wait any longer. "I want to know why," he said, looking directly at Robert. "Why did you take Sarah away? Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we were happy. At least I thought we were." Robert looked down at his hands. "I met Sarah in an online chat group about photography. We started talking, and she told me about her life in Ohio with her math teacher husband. And you decided to steal her away." Jack's voice was rising. Robert shook his head. "It wasn't like that. Not at first. We were just friends talking about cameras and photos. But then she started telling me about how lonely she felt. How you were always busy with school and grading papers. How you two had grown apart without realizing it." Jack was surprised by this. "She never told me she was unhappy." "She said she tried," Robert replied. "But you were always too busy to really talk. Too tired after work. Too focused on trying to have a baby." Jack thought about this. Had Sarah really tried to tell him she was unhappy? Had he been too busy to notice? "So you told her to leave me?" Jack asked. Robert shook his head again. "No, I just listened to her. And then one day she asked if she could come visit me in Manchester. I said yes, without really thinking about what it meant." Thomas was watching Jack's face carefully, ready to step in if his anger returned. But Jack didn't look angry now. He looked sad and confused. "She came to England, and we spent a week together," Robert continued. "At the end of that week, she said she wasn't going back. She said she felt alive with me in a way she hadn't felt in years with you." Jack closed his eyes for a moment. The pain of hearing these words was almost physical, like a punch to his stomach. "But you two didn't last," Jack said, opening his eyes again. "Thomas told me she left you after 8 months." Robert nodded, looking ashamed. "Yes. I'm not good at staying in one place, or with one person. I get restless. I started working late, going out with friends instead of coming home. Pretty much the same things she said you did." "So she left you too," Jack said quietly. "She did. She said it was like history repeating itself. She had left one man who didn't have time for her, only to find another one who was the same." Robert took a drink of his tea. "The last time I saw her, she said coming to England was the biggest mistake of her life." Jack didn't know what to say. For 5 years, he had imagined Sarah living happily with Robert, laughing about how they had fooled poor Jack. But the reality was very different. "Do you know where she is now?" Jack asked. Robert nodded. "She went back to America, but not to Ohio. She moved to California to start fresh. At least, that's what she told me in her last email." Jack looked out the window at the boats in the harbor. The sun was starting to set, turning the sky orange and pink. 5 years of anger and pain, and for what? Sarah wasn't even with Robert anymore. The three men sat in silence for a while. Outside, the sky grew darker as evening approached. Lights came on along the harbor, reflecting in the water. Jack stared out the window, thinking about everything he had just learned. "I spent 5 years being angry," Jack finally said. 5 years blaming you for ruining my life. But maybe my life was already falling apart, and I just didn't see it. Robert looked uncomfortable. "That doesn't excuse what I did. I should have stopped talking to Sarah when I realized what was happening between us. I was selfish." Thomas watched his brother with surprise. Robert had never been good at admitting when he was wrong. "Yes, you were selfish," Jack agreed. "But I was blind. I didn't see that my wife was unhappy. I was too busy with my own life." Jack stood up and walked to the window. The boats moved gently on the water. People were walking along the harbor, couples holding hands, families with children. Normal, happy people living their lives. "What will you do now?" Thomas asked. "Will you try to find Sarah in California?" Jack shook his head. "No, that part of my life is over. It's been over for 5 years. I just couldn't accept it." He turned back to face the twin brothers. They looked so alike, but now Jack could see clear differences between them. Thomas sat straight and proper, even in a casual setting, while Robert slouched in his chair. Thomas's expression was open and honest, while Robert's eyes couldn't quite meet Jack's. "I quit my teaching job to come here," Jack said. "I have no job, no wife, and no real plan for what comes next." "I'm sorry," Robert said quietly. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry for the pain I caused you." Jack nodded. He believed Robert was truly sorry. It didn't fix anything, but it was something. "You could teach in England for a while," Thomas suggested. "There's always a need for good math teachers. It would be a fresh start." Jack hadn't considered this possibility. He had been so focused on finding Robert that he hadn't thought about what would come after. "Maybe," he said. "I do love teaching." Robert stood up suddenly. He went to a desk in the corner of the room and wrote something on a piece of paper. He handed it to Jack. "This is Sarah's email address," Robert said. "The last one I had for her. I don't know if it still works, but maybe you two need proper closure. A chance to say the things you never said before." Jack took the paper but didn't look at it. He folded it and put it in his pocket. "Thank you." The three men looked at each other. It was a strange situation none of them could have imagined that morning. A royal guard, his twin brother, and the man who had thrown a sandwich at the guard's face. Life could be very unexpected. "I should get back to London," Thomas said, checking his watch. "My special leave ends tomorrow afternoon." "Where will you stay tonight?" Robert asked Jack. "I don't know," Jack admitted. "I didn't plan this far ahead." "You can stay here," Robert offered. "I have a spare room. It's the least I can do." Jack thought about this offer. Yesterday, he would have laughed at the idea of staying in Robert's home. But today, after everything that had happened, it seemed like the right thing to do. "Okay," Jack said. "Thank you." Thomas smiled at his brother with pride. Maybe Robert was finally growing up. "I'll come back tomorrow before I return to duty," Thomas told them. "We can have breakfast together." As Thomas left the apartment, Jack felt a strange sense of peace. He had come to England full of anger, looking for someone to blame for his unhappiness. Instead, he had found something unexpected. A chance to let go of the past and start thinking about the future. Outside, the last light of day faded from the sky. In the harbor, boat lights twinkled like stars on the dark water. It was a beautiful sight, Jack realized. Maybe England wasn't such a bad place after all.